My dear friends, how you express my gratitude for the tremendous popular upsurge in favor of democracy and the law that you embody throughout France, and to which your numerous and fervent presence today testifies. It is impossible for me to hide my emotion at seeing you here and in all our departments standing with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing with us to defend what this decision has trampled underfoot and which I hold dear above all else: my people, my country, and my honor. A heartfelt thank you for your courage, your tenacity, and your generosity. You are wonderful. You are wonderful. Thank you also to Louis, Eric, and Jourdain. For their powerful and friendly words, for their energy, and for their strength of conviction at a time when we are engaged in this essential fight for truth and justice. This fight also for the honor of our movement and the democratic freedoms of the French people. Thank you to the foreign personalities, heads of government or parties who spoke, especially to our European partners, members of the Patriots for Europe group in the European Parliament. Thank you to the hundreds of European and national deputies, and to the local elected officials of France who made their voices heard on this occasion. And of course, a huge thank you to the 500,000 French people, whether they are National Rally voters or not, who, by immediately signing our petition, expressed their solidarity with us. Your support, your messages, your rallying cry warm our hearts. They are for us, and for me, of course, an additional reason not to give up. And let everyone rest assured, I will not leave anything undone. Like you, we share a holy horror of injustice and bias. We can only understand each other, you, the people of France, who suffer your share of denigration, contempt, and injustice every day. Surrendering yourselves to all the social and physical insecurities, mistreated in your own country, denied in your culture and in your identity. Yet you remain unwavering and convinced that discouragement and submission are not an option, that the fight must be waged. What unites us, my friends, is our love for France, our love for our people, but it is also our idea of what is true and just. This is the meaning of our commitment, the soul of our struggle, everything that builds our convictions, forges our determination, and drives our action. Like you, we are among those who do not resign, who do not bow down, who do not abdicate. We know that behind the rights and freedoms we invoke, we defend the rights and freedoms of the French, of all French people, and particularly of the French who are discriminated against in their own country. This is why we believe in politics, because it can, because it must, fight injustice, change lives, but also confront the forces of the system whose only plan is to maintain itself, whatever the cost, whatever the baseness of the means implemented to achieve this. Since my youngest age, I have known the vicissitudes of politics. I know its constraints and injustices. I know its brutality and even its violence. I know its wounds, but I do not know abandonment. I know the suffering they cause, but I do not know despair. I know outrage, but I do not know renunciation. As opponents, we learned very quickly that the legal battle that could be waged against us was an integral part of the political struggle. On the long road to accountability, we have had to endure so many lies, so much slander, so many attacks, so many bad trials that we had to thwart. So many would have given up our position, but we are still here, and very much here. In all European countries, my dear friends and leaders of the national parties are being prosecuted, like our friend Matteo Salvini recently, for kidnapping no less, for having refused to allow illegal migrants to land in his country. Troublesome candidates are banned from running, as in Romania, and many others are victims of state smear campaigns without being able to defend themselves legally. Like you, like all the activists, executives, and elected officials of our movement, I have never fought for myself, not for advantages or honors. What is our personal fate worth compared to the cause we defend? What is our comfort of life worth when it is the very existence of France that is at stake? You know, in politics, and especially in the opposition, crowns are made more of thorns than laurels. However, we have a high opinion of politics, because there is no activity more noble than turning toward others and beneficial public action than politics. The debate of ideas, the fair confrontation of points of view, and the federation of energies in search of the common good. That is what politics is for us. This is why militant commitment seems so natural to us, so worthy. Like many party members and elected officials of all stripes, we see political commitment as a kind of priesthood, a secular priesthood, but one that requires a great deal of sacrifice. This political commitment appears to us to be, in today's France and Europe, an absolute imperative. When the country is crumbling and losing its sovereignty, when the people are suffering, when the collective future seems uncertain, then commitment is not only a necessity, it is a duty. I continue to believe that politics is not what some would like to make it out to be, even with legal and supposedly respectable appearances, a perverse game of persecution of opponents, criminalization of adversaries, the desire to ruin opposition parties with a single objective, to keep power while leading the country to ruin and chaos. And because political activity is respectable and noble, it must also be respected. Elected officials are not trophies on hunting boards that should be hung on some idiot's wall. Political freedom in the country, and therefore the democratic conduct of public affairs, is at stake. It would only be reassuring for our society if the hunt for politicians lurked the goal of discouraging vocations for public engagement. And yet, this is what is emerging in our country, which is today facing a very serious crisis of political engagement that you are fortunately giving the lie to. So, one might wonder, apart from making them trophies on a hunting board, why add humiliation to the prosecution, I think, of this former President of the Republic, whom we have nevertheless fought extensively, and against whom the loss of his family rights, or this year in prison, is requested, with the barely concealed objective of making his fault, if it exists, an act more severely punished than most crimes. I am thinking of these incriminations, whose title, dishonorable, are far removed from the facts for which we are asked to answer. Humiliation, just like revenge or the concept of a judicial hunting board, all of this is the opposite of the idea I have of justice. All of this horrifies me. I am not saying this to shirk my responsibilities. It is neither in my nature nor in my principles. I am saying it because this is how I presented myself last fall before the court, with the respect I believe is due to the institution of justice in our country. I did so with arguments of law and reason that seemed to me to completely exonerate me, as well as my companions and our party. I did so with the confidence that a litigant is entitled to place in the justice system of a democratic country. This case, I remind you, was initiated at the instigation of our socialist adversaries in the European Parliament, with the heavily armed arm of European institutions, more inclined to look at the speck in the eye of its opponents than the beam in the eye of its supporters, and even its highest-ranking members or leaders. Recent cases of serious corruption bear witness to this, such as Qatargate and Huawei, cases in which OLAF, that totalitarian body of the European Commission, preferred to look the other way. This internal police service of the European Parliament, whose operation and practices are contrary to all principles of law, criticized moreover on numerous occasions in parliamentary reports in particular, concentrates its unhealthy energy on building cases against states, against civil servants. Dear Fabrice Leggeri, you know what I'm talking about, or against the personalities who dare to oppose the authoritarian brutality of the European Union. We were from the outset, as you see, very far from legal motivations and a judicial approach free from political bias. I do not hesitate to emphasize the political dimension in the trial against us, because as for others, what should have remained a simple administrative disagreement with the services of the European Parliament has transformed into the most severe and most infamous incrimination possible. And if the origin of this trial was political, the hearing of a frightening bias was also, as was the investigation entrusted to a magistrate from the Magistrates' Union, as was the indictment of which I am nevertheless cruel enough to recall, as Jordan recalled, that, deprived of any evidence in one aspect of the case, the prosecution admitted, "Despite this, I cannot bring myself to ask for an acquittal. It would hurt me too much." And finally, of course, the judgment, whose argumentation has almost unanimously led serious jurists to oppose it. This is why we must stop blaming ourselves, criticizing a court decision. It is not a court decision, it is a political decision. So, one might wonder, apart from making them trophies on a hunting board, why add humiliation to the prosecution, I think, of this former President of the Republic, whom we have nevertheless fought extensively, and against whom the loss of his family rights, or this year in prison, is requested, with the barely concealed objective of making his fault, if it exists, an act more severely punished than most crimes. I am thinking of these incriminations, whose title, dishonorable, are far removed from the facts for which we are asked to answer. Humiliation, just like revenge or the concept of a judicial hunting board, all of this is the opposite of the idea I have of justice. All of this horrifies me. I am not saying this to shirk my responsibilities. It is neither in my nature nor in my principles. I am saying it because this is how I presented myself last fall before the court, with the respect I believe is due to the institution of justice in our country. I did so with arguments of law and reason that seemed to me to completely exonerate me, as well as my companions in our party. I did so with the confidence that a litigant is entitled to place in the justice system of a democratic country. This case, I remind you, was initiated at the instigation of our socialist adversaries in the European Parliament, with the heavily armed arm of European institutions, more inclined to look at the speck in the eye of its opponents than the beam in the eye of its supporters, and even its highest-ranking members or leaders. Recent cases of serious corruption bear witness to this, such as Qatargate and Huawei, cases in which OLAF, that totalitarian body of the European Commission, preferred to look the other way. This internal police service of the European Parliament, whose operation and practices are contrary to all principles of law, criticized moreover on numerous occasions in parliamentary reports in particular, concentrates its unhealthy energy on building cases against states, against civil servants. Dear Fabrice Leggeri, you know what I'm talking about, or against the personalities who dare to oppose the authoritarian brutality of the European Union. We were from the outset, as you see, very far from legal motivations and a judicial approach free from political bias. I do not hesitate to emphasize the political dimension in the trial against us, because as for others, what should have remained a simple administrative disagreement with the services of the European Parliament has transformed into the most severe and most infamous incrimination possible. And if the origin of this trial was political, the hearing of a frightening bias was also, as was the investigation entrusted to a magistrate from the Magistrates' Union, as was the indictment of which I am nevertheless cruel enough to recall, as Jordan recalled, that, deprived of any evidence in one aspect of the case, the prosecution admitted, "Despite this, I cannot bring myself to ask for an acquittal, it would hurt me too much." And finally, of course, the judgment, whose argumentation has almost unanimously led serious jurists to oppose it. This is why we must stop blaming ourselves, criticizing a court decision. It is not a court decision, it is a political decision. So I should be eliminated from political life, without any possible recourse. In the name of a so-called disturbance of democratic public order, a concept purely and simply invented for the occasion. Pardon me, but the main and even the only disturbance of democratic public order is that which consists of preventing the sole sovereign, the people, from expressing themselves. This is why I affirm that this political decision has not only flouted the rule of law, but also the state of democracy. Let me be clear, we do not tar all justice with the same brush. We do not forget that there are exemplary judges who carry out their work with impartiality, respect for those seeking justice, and concern for the law. We, of course, condemn insults and threats against magistrates, all magistrates. They are unworthy and do not serve the cause that is summed up by one of the most beautiful words in our language, justice. You have understood, we do not ask to be above the law, but not below the law. We are not second-class citizens, because we would have committed the crime in the eyes of some of having made the defense of the homeland and its sovereignty the fight of our lives. The 13 million voters who honor us with their vote and their trust are not half-citizens who should fight their necks for their heresy. Not second-class defendants who could be denied the basic rights of citizens or defendants. It is worth remembering that, having garnered more than 37% of the vote in the legislative elections and 31% in the European elections, we are already deprived of the slightest function, even symbolic, in the National Assembly or the European Parliament, which gives lessons in democracy morning, noon, and night. How can we believe that in France, the country of enlightenment and human rights, one can govern having garnered 5% of the vote, and that a party that garners 37% of the vote is banned from any office? Under these conditions, I say, our fight is also a fight for civil rights, because there are clearly several categories of citizens in France. Imagine, my friends, that some gloomy and intolerant people were even offended that we could gather today in this square, in the capital of our country, as if the right of assembly should also be taken away from us. The same people, moreover, who find nothing scandalous in violently demonstrating against the election results, accuse us with arguments as crude and outrageous, as excessive as they are ridiculous, of holding a rally in support of democracy and expressing our indignation when the founding principles of our rule of law are so obviously violated. To all the French people whom we want to poison, I want to say that our line of conduct will never be that of the brutalization dear to other political parties, but that of the peaceful pastor Martin Luther King for the civil rights of American citizens who were at the time oppressed and deprived of rights. We therefore intend to invite all French people who love freedom to join us in a peaceful and democratic resistance, a popular and patriotic resistance. We will continue to fight, as we do, with discipline and dignity, despite the provocations that will inevitably occur and to which, to the despair of our opponents, we will not give in. Despite the fantasies of our adversaries, there is no spirit of sedition among us, only the unalterable will to defend their rights for ourselves and for all French people in mainland France, overseas and throughout the world, who are excluded or feel excluded. All their rights. It is precisely because we are attached to the rule of law that we protest against its distortion, its instrumentalization, not by judges, but by judges who have decided to make our most sacred institutions the tool of their ideology with a feeling of omnipotence. No one, and especially not the defenders of the principle of judicial independence, can condone the fact that magistrates, under the guise of union membership, boast of waging an openly political militant fight against patriots, an ostensible fight claimed in a spirit of political vengeance. In this respect, the statement from the Magistrates' Union, cited by Jordan, is both eloquent and worrying. No one, and especially not the defenders of the principle of judicial independence, can condone the fact that magistrates criminalize sovereignist political ideas or make them an aggravating circumstance. I recall the court's senseless argument, I quote, "The attack on the interests of the European Union is particularly serious insofar as it is carried out not without a certain cynicism, but with determination by a political party that proclaims its opposition to the European institutions." This argument underlines the eminently political nature of this decision. That the unjusticiable may not tremble at the idea of seeing the retroactivity of law, European regulation, or jurisprudence applied to him from now on, as was the case in this affair, because these ideas, or his name, do not please a judge whose impartiality is thus seriously questioned. Justice in a country of law that respects itself cannot be a lottery, my friends, and the innocent must expect it, not fear it. Nor are judges legislators who would replace the democratically elected representatives of the people. Everyone must be in their place, and we must remember that the judiciary is not a power, but an authority. Who can justify that, being presumed innocent by having filed an appeal, we can nevertheless be rendered ineligible by the goodwill of a decision whose facade of legal argumentation our most ardent opponents struggle to justify? That the right to an effective remedy is presented in this criminal decision as a privilege of which we should be deprived, when, on the contrary, it is the quintessence of the law in a mature democracy. Who can be satisfied that France is burying the principle of double jurisdiction, which is a guarantee forming part of the fundamental rights of every litigant in a state governed by the rule of law? This principle is based on the reasonable conviction that judges can make mistakes. And this is so true that nearly half of first-instance decisions are overturned or modified on appeal. Who can finally accept the erasure of our model of justice, of which we were rightly so proud, and which, I remind you, recognizes two inalienable rights for the accused: the right to defend themselves, the right to have an investigation both for the prosecution and for the defense. That is to say, an adversarial procedure that seeks the truth, and not a system that seeks to make you recognize, through the threat of a more severe sentence, the charges of which you are innocent. I know, the lawyer who cannot help but sometimes, often, wake up in me, cannot accept that the simple fact of defending oneself during a trial can be held up as supposed proof of guilt, and used as an argument to turn us into potential repeat offenders. This is not justice, it is called a witch hunt. I also cannot accept that the essential serenity of justice is undermined by a murky game played by certain magistrates with the media. As if justice could be a lever in a media battle against politicians. And this murky game went so far as to send the full judgment to the media on the very evening of the deliberations, while our lawyers only received it the next day. As you have understood, we are not challenging the justice system, but are demanding that its abuses, so unworthy of a democracy, cease. In this incredible reversal of accusation, it would be us who would be a danger to democracy and the rule of law. I say it again and again solemnly here. It is we who are the most fervent defenders, the most ardent protectors of democracy and the rule of law. Jordan is right. The lamentable spectacle that France is putting on is not up to the standards of the high state institutions that made our country a benchmark in the world. It does not live up to the universal message of the homeland of human rights, nor does it live up to its image as a great enlightened democracy. No one outside our borders can understand why, today, some in France believe that the democratic expression of the sovereign people must be regulated and limited when it does not conform to their vision. However, Article 3 of the Constitution, of our Constitution, is clear. Sovereignty belongs to the people, who exercise it through their representatives and by means of referendums. We often forget line 2. No section of the people, nor any individual can claim to exercise it. This fundamental reminder of our Constitution is salutary in the face of those who consider, I quote, the sovereign people as a threat to democratic public order. Reactions from abroad underline how much this decision clashes with the model that France was in the eyes of the world. This force of reason respected on the international scene, for its attachment to law and justice, to which each nation can speak in confidence as an equal. The entire international press, whatever its political leanings, expressed its dismay, even its indignation, following the decision of Monday, March 31st, 2025, including even the very consensual The Economist. But beyond us, beyond me, what we are defending today and in the months to come is the freedom of all, the rule of law for all, equal treatment for all. What we are defending are the foundations of our democracy, which since Montesquieu have been based on the principle of the separation of powers. Yes, I say it. Justice cannot interfere in the way elected officials carry out their mandate in the service of the French people, of the lords, that there is no corruption or personal enrichment. Nor does it have to choose the candidates for elections. There are balances that our country must regain if it does not want to fall into a system other than democracy, because all our principles are actually faltering on their foundations. We also defend the presumption of innocence, which, along with the secrecy of the investigation, clearly needs to be urgently re-established in our country, because when the rights of litigants disappear, when they are flouted daily by the media tribunal, all citizens are affected because they are all potentially threatened. We are not the only ones concerned about this. Voices outside our movement, and sometimes from camps opposed to the national rally, have spoken out to highlight the questionable and even fanciful nature of the legal foundations of this judgment. Their intellectual honesty honors them, and their freedom of thought and courage honor France. These positions show that this fight for justice, this fight for the law, is not only ours, but that of society as a whole, of the institution itself, of the judicial community, and, of course, of the head of state, guarantor of the proper functioning of institutions. You know, the decision of which we are victims, like the unjust decisions that affect so many litigants in France, either by delays or by disconcerting results, are also the sign of an erosion of our institutions that we feel in opinion polls and which demonstrate a loss of confidence among the French in their justice system. This observation only strengthens our determination to see the state recover from its foundations. However, there can be no recovery of the state without restoring popular confidence in the justice system. The justice system has an essential and noble role, one in which I deeply believe. Through its exemplary nature and its sense of the common good, the justice system, aware of the scope of its decisions and its social role, must reassure and unite citizens. We will give her the material and human resources to do so, without waiting to also engage in introspection and not to cut herself off from the country by locking herself even further into a corporatist logic. I want to believe that this affair will have a positive effect and will allow an awareness of the state of the rule of law in our country, of the sacred notion of the rights of the defense, of the place of justice in our society, of the right of the people to choose their representatives, that is to say, in a word, of democracy. Those who try to subjugate us or make us bow our heads only seem great to those who are already on their knees. We stand for justice, for the people, and for France. Today is a historic day, a day when a great movement in favor of the people's freedom rises with joy and fervor. This aspiration for protection, for respect, like the citizens' desire to be treated as subjects, is irrepressible, and I believe it is irresistible. This aspiration is ours. This is what we have been defending, against all odds, for decades. And I deeply believe that we are the only movement strong enough and courageous enough to lead this fight. So, my friends, never forget the reasons why they attack us so harshly with such disloyalty. Never forget that they are doing this for only one reason. We are winning. You are winning. Never forget that they are fully aware of the immense wave that your millions of ballots represent from election to election. Never forget that we are the party of builders, the party of conquerors, the party of tireless lovers of our great and beautiful nation. Never forget that we must keep close to our hearts and bodies the only cause, the most beautiful cause worthwhile, France. From everywhere, citizens of all political persuasions, of all origins, of all faiths, must join us in leading this work of national recovery and social reconstruction. For this, I need your perseverance, your courage, your fighting spirit, your strength, your hope. This will be a formidable political and human adventure. This will be the highest mission of your life for each of you. And when victory comes, it will be the dawn of the Renaissance for France. Long live justice, long live the Republic, long live France.